Hey everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video. And a lot of talk has been going on about like balance changes in Hearthstone, what should be nerfed and all that stuff. But one of the most often things that comes up is like, oh, stop talking about nerfing cards. We need to buff cards. So I thought let's take a look at the history of what Blizzard has done when they buffed cards and how it has affected the metagame. So basically, I'm just going to look at literally every card they buffed in the last... they started doing this last summer, this time, about. And we'll go through all of that, starting with the most recent to the oldest buffs. I'm going to ignore the cards that were, like, reverted for Wild, like when Yogg got reverted, or Raza, because this is going to be more standard-centric. And those are just kind of, yeah, reverts on old cards. We're going to talk about buffs directly made to impact the current metagame. So, let's start with the most recent buffs. We had Eldor Attendant, the Libram Paladin minion, went from a 2-mana 2/3 to a 1-mana 1/3. Its impact on the meta, barely any. Libram Pally is a Pally, or pure Libram Pally if you play that. Very niche deck, not very good, basically non-existent on Legend Ladder. Very memey, not very good. The buff really didn't do much for it. And there was another buff to Paladin as well in the prior patch before this one, which was Libram of Justice. It was the 6-mana spell that set your enemy's health to 1, and you get a 1/4 weapon, and then it was 5 mana. This also basically did nothing to improve Libram Paladin. So we've seen 2 buffs recently to Paladin to try and get it to be better, and neither basically did anything. So far, not so great. And then in the last patch, we also had 3 Shaman buffs. We had Torrent spell, went from 5 mana to 4 mana. It deals 8 damage, and it costs 3 less if you cast a spell the prior turn. So the buffed version is a 1 mana, deal 8. You have Shattered Rumbler, which is a 5 mana 4/6, deal 2 damage to all their minions if you cast a spell prior turn. Now is buffed to a 5/6. And then you also have the Lurker Below, which was deals 3 damage to an enemy minion, and if it kills it, it will do that to a random neighbor. And that went from a 6 mana 6/3 to a 6 mana 6/5. None of these cards see play because Shaman sees absolutely no play. It is nearly sub 40% on across all ranks on HS Replay win rate. It is just dumpster tier. And yeah, again, these buffs did absolutely nothing. Next, we're going to take a look at a series of basically priest buffs that happened when the rotation, right before rotation occurred, to try and make priest more viable, make its class identity a little bit different, just updated it to make it, you know, a little more competitive. So I didn't include Power Word Shield in here because I don't feel that was a buff to the card. It was a 1 mana spell that would give you health, minion +2 health, and you draw a card. It was buffed to 0 mana, but you don't draw a card, and that basically killed it. It doesn't see any play. So I did mention it, but it basically won't really fall into the buff category. But we have Shadow Word Death. It was 3 mana, now 2 mana. This card sees play in basically every priest deck. It's very good. Usually a 2 of. I mean, 2 mana death. It's very strong. Good to kill big minions. So, yeah. I mean, it saw plenty of play beforehand, but now it's like auto-include. You have Holy Smite, which was buffed to deal 3 damage instead of 2, but can only attack minions, which can be a nerf in some way, because, you know, you can't do, like, Malaga stuff, but Velen was Hall of Fame, so not so great. This card doesn't see much play. I think it sees, like, fringe play in Highlander Priest, but overall, yeah, kind of a miss. Doesn't really see much play. Less play than before, for sure. We have Holy Nova. It was a 5 mana AoE, deal 2 damage. Deal 2 damage to all enemies and heal all friendly characters for 2. Stayed the same effect-wise, except it didn't hit the enemy in the face, and it costs 4 mana. Sees fringe play in like Galakron Priest. Some people run 1 of it, some run 2, some run none. And it's like a 1 of in Highlander Priest, so still sees play. Didn't really see any play beforehand, so at least significant enough to give it some play, so not bad. Popular Zephyr's Choice as well, at 4 mana. And you have Shadow Madness, costs 4 mana. You steal an enemy with 3 attack or less, and you can attack with it. You usually just trade into something. And now it's 3 mana. It's pretty much a staple in Galakron Priest. Some people run a 1 of it. Most run 2, and some people run none. But Overall, solid buff, definitely has picked up play in a lot of decks, and another good Zephrys option. We have Temple Enforcer. It was a 6 mana 6/6 minion that gave a friendly minion plus 3 health. Now it's a 5 mana 5/6. Premium stats plus upside, but not quite good enough. Priest just doesn't really want to play this tempo-ish game that well. You rather just get it randomly, and often it's just too expensive and doesn't do enough, even with the health buff. And it never saw play beforehand, so basically this buff did nothing, except give Zephrys a brand new favorite card to always offer you. And Thoughtsteal, 3 mana spell, get 2 random cards from your opponent's deck, now cost 2 mana. Basically auto-include in most Galakron Priest decks, in Highlander Priest, and is just super solid, really good. Get 2 mana, 2 cards, and they can be really insane and do stupid stuff. Love the card in the Galakron Priest deck, and this buff has made this card see 0 play to a lot of play. Very effective. So that's it for the Priest ones. The rework definitely did some good stuff for Priest in terms of its viability. You might argue that the randomness of like Thoughtsteal and stuff's a bit triggering, but overall, the buffs, this is probably their most successful little batch of buffs, and did good work for Priest. Priest is viable. It's not like tier 1 or anything, but it's playable, so, you know, that's good, I guess. We have one kind of off one here. Pilfer was buffed. When it was made, it was add a random card from your opponent's class, and it was updated to be another class. So better in like Burgle mechanics, where if you're in the mirror, you didn't get, you couldn't activate your Burgle cards, but in any matchup, you just get a wider spectrum. It sees Fringe play. It saw Fringe play like Quest Rogue for a little bit and like some Burgle Rogue lists. That was about it during its buff period, but overall pretty irrelevant. Doesn't really see any play right now. And then we go back to, they had like this Boomsday buff experiment. They buffed a bunch of cards from Boomsday last summer. This was the first time they had really ever buffed cards. So how did it play out? Well, we had 2 warrior cards that got buffed. We had Beryllium Nullifier, was an untargetable magnetic mech, 7 mana 3/8, went to a 7 mana 4/8. Basically, buff did nothing, saw 0 play. It got discovered a lot with like Boom and Omega Assembly, but really didn't see any play. And same goes for Security Rover. It was a 6 mana 2/5. Every time it takes damage, you get a 2/3 mech. It went to 2/6. Again, no play, no serious play. Just get it randomly off Discover options. Then went Dr. Morgan, a Warlock legendary 8 mana 5/5, I believe, that summons a minion from your deck, and you'd swap spots with it. They buffed it by 2 mana to 6, and still saw 0 play. Card is complete garbage. Like, just never good. It's never really seen play in Standard, nor Wild. It's just kind of a fail of a card. So the buff didn't... None of these buffs have done anything yet. Spirit Bomb was deal 4 damage, and damage your hero for 4 as well, and went from 2 mana to 1 mana. It saw a little bit of play in, like, some Control Warlock decks, a little bit even, like, Zoo for removal. But overall, pretty minimal buff. It went from 0 play to some. It was actually a nerfed even Shaman and Wild, ironically. But yeah, buff didn't do much for the Standard game at all. Thunderhead was insane Shaman minion, 4 mana 3/5, that summoned 2 1/1 like eels with Rush every time you cast an Overload card, and they buffed it to a 3/6. So this card was already saw plenty of play, and then it just saw even more play. So it was a really good card that was seeing play, and yeah, didn't really need a buff, but it got one. And yeah, of course, you buff a good card, it's going to be really good. So Thunderhead saw lots of play. Stormbringer was the Shaman legendary spell, is 7 mana. Basically transform all of your minions on board into random legendaries. They buffed it to 6, and it didn't really see much play at 7, but at 6 it saw a lot. It was like this Battle Cry random Shaman deck that people played a lot in Standard, and in even Shaman, it's a staple there too. Yeah, this buff was one of the more successful ones in terms of making a card that didn't see much play, but it wasn't like disgustingly obnoxious. Yes, it was high rolling and random, but it didn't like break the meta or anything. It was just a really solid card. So one of the more effective buffs of this patch. We had Violet Haze, rogue spell, 3 mana, add 2 random Death Rattle minions to your hand. Was buffed to 2 mana, saw no play. Pogo Hopper, which is a 2 mana mech. It's a 1/1. Every time you play one, you get +2/+2 on it. And it went to 1 mana. So it gave it a little more life to play in Row. People played it quite a bit, but it was never really good. People just loved their Pogo Hopper. and it was like okay to try and counter Control Warrior with it, but overall the buff like didn't do a lot. It didn't really up the viability of it, and it kind of just died off. And then we have some priest buffs. We've got Cloning Device, 2 mana spell, discover a minion from your opponent's deck. Was buffed to 1 mana. I have never seen this card played ever on ladder, not once. Extra Arms was buffed from 3 mana to 2 mana, and it's a spell that give a minion +2/+2, add another arms to your hand, which did the same thing. Went to 2. It was an auto-include in Combo Priest, which was basically tier 1 for quite a while, so they ended up reverting this one. But I actually think this buff was probably fine. Extra Arms wasn't really the issue with Combo Priest. Combo Priest was still tier 1 after this buff was reverted. But yeah, I mean, it just made that deck even stronger, so I actually think this buff was one of the better ones, because that card saw 0 play beforehand. Then we have Glowstone Technician, Paladin Epic. It was a 6 mana 3/4 that gave all minions to your hand +2/+2, buffed to 5 mana. So basically saw 0 play before the buff, but after the buff, it saw some decent play in like hand buff Mech Paladin, hand buff just like little shitter Paladin. Saw a decent amount of play. It wasn't like top tier, but made the card go from unplayable to pretty playable. So I'd say that was a hit on that one. And then we have Crystology. It was a 2 mana spell. Draw 2/1 attack minions from your deck. And it was buffed to 1 mana. This card was already like auto-include in Shirvallah Paladin. And buffing it to 1 was just insane, because not only was it really made Shirvallah Paladin even better, but it was really good in like aggressive decks like Mech Paladin or whatever you want to run it in. Like it's basically auto-include in Wild in so many decks there right now. And just a really insane card. It made a very, very good card into basically a broken one. And I don't think that's really what they should do with buffs. And I didn't really get this one. And I still don't get this one to this day. But yeah, Crystology, insane card. Next, we have the Mage ones. So we have Unexpected Results. A 4 mana spell that summons 2 random 2 drops, and it scales up with spell damage on board. And it went to 3 mana. Saw 0 play before the buff. Saw 0 play after the buff. Just not a good card. And then we got the mother of all buffs, Luna's Pocket Galaxy. 7 mana spell, make all your minions in your deck cost 1. It was buffed by 2 mana to 5, and it completely broke the game. This was like the most egregious of the buffs. They reverted it. Was not nearly fast enough. It took like over a month. Because basically, Cyclone Mage was already top tier, pretty close to top tier with a 3 mana Conjurer's Calling. And then you had a Pocket Galaxy to it, and it was completely broken. And then Old Doom expansion happened, you had Reno and Zephrys, and it just broke everything. Yeah, this was a buff that hopefully they learned from. Nobody really saw it coming, to be fair. Most people did not see it coming as breaking the game, but with a little bit more internal testing, maybe they'll pick it up next time. But yeah, this was definitely the biggest mishap from the buff experiment, but overall, you know, you make mistakes, you learn from them, so hopefully they'll learn from it next time. Then we have the Hunter cards. We have Flark's Boomzooka, the legendary spell. 8 mana, it summons 3 random minions from your deck. They attack random enemies, and then they die. Went to 7 mana, never saw play before, never saw play after. Horrible card, completely pointless. Necromechanic was a 5 mana 3/6 with an active effect. Your Death Rattles proc twice. It went to 4 mana. Saw basically no play at 5, and saw fringe play in like greedy Death Rattle mech decks at 4, but overall kind of got cut because it still just wasn't enough. It's still 2 win more, and that deck just didn't really want to do that. So it was like an okay buff, but really didn't do a heck of a lot. Mulch Muncher, a 10 mana mech. I believe it's a 8/8 or 9/9 with Rush. I could be probably an 8/8. I don't have the graphic, but anyways, it went to 9 mana, and yeah, just saw a decent amount of play in Treant Druid. When Treant Druid got more and more support, Mulch Muncher became better and better because it got to be 0 mana a lot quicker. I don't know if the buff had a lot to do with it. 10 to 9. I think it probably still would have saw play with the eventual Treant Druid support, but it did see more play afterwards regardless, so somewhat of a successful buff. We have Gloop Sprayer as well for Druid. It was an 8 mana 4/4 minion that summons a copy of its adjacent minion. So you get like, you have a Mally or a Lucent Bark on the left, you play it in the middle, you get another Mally and a Lucent Bark. Card saw like 0 play, very little play before the buff. After the buff, it saw a tiny bit. Mostly saw it in like a Lucent Bark deck because of the synergies out of a Psych Mill, and now that was 7, Lucent Bark was 8. But overall was way too slow, way too greedy, and never really amounted to anything. And that basically sums up all the buffs that at least I was aware of in Hearthstone history. Overall, the majority of the buffs have either done very little or a bit. Not really enough to ever bump a deck into, like, playability. Basically, it would, like, enhance something. So, when you're looking at, like, Shaman and Paladin right now, if you buff something like they've historically done, it's just not going to do anything because the power level of cards so much higher are just that much higher. You kind of have to scale them back too with nerfs. So people are like, oh, please, just buff stuff. I don't think it's going to work if history tells us anything. You have the anomaly of like Luna's Pocket Galaxy that broke the game. But again, remember, Mage had an insane tool of kit, like a toolkit before that. It was still really good. It was good after it got nerfed too. And that's not the case with Shaman and Paladin right now. So yes, I do think buffs can do good stuff. It can make some cards that weren't viable, and they've proven to be able to do that. But in terms of making classes playable that weren't before, it just hasn't shown to be a thing. So hopefully we get some kind of a balance patch in the near future before the August expansion, because that's still like 2 months away, and this metagame is brutal. But I just thought I'd show you that buffs aren't necessarily the way to go, and if they are, they kind of need to be in conjunction with significant nerfs. So maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next video. But if you like the video, please like and subscribe. If you have any buffs I missed or any opinions you have different on this stuff, let me know in the comments below. Have a great day. Stay salty, my friends.